Well, while things weren't great for the Miami Dolphins in 2013, they could have been a whole lot worse. You had the whole scandal with Richie Incognito and Jonathan Martin, and that had the potential to really tear apart this organization, really become a dark cloud over the organization as a whole, and cause everything to fall apart and the team to completely implode. And to the credit of those involved, it didn't. The Dolphins still found a way to hang around all season. They found a way to be in the playoff picture late in the year, and they had a chance to make the playoffs. All they had to do was win one of their last two games in the 2013 regular season. Unfortunately, they failed to do so and looked kind of bad in the process, getting kind of dominated those last two games. So they ended up finishing 8-8 and second in the AFC East, and this close yet this far away from making the playoffs. And a large reason for that, besides certain other things, is the fact that they went 2-4 in the AFC East. When you don't have a winning record or even a 500 record in your division, it becomes incredibly difficult to entertain any realistic thoughts of making the playoffs whatsoever. You have to be able to handle your business in the division first. It's something that the Miami Dolphins fell woefully short in 2013. So heading into this offseason with the new general manager and a coach that's kind of on the hot seat, I was expecting the Dolphins to be somewhat aggressive in free agency. And they were. They brought in Brandon Albert, their big free agent signing, to man the left tackle position, to be that blindside protector for young franchise quarterback Ryan Tannehill. They brought in some scrap heap guys, as I would call them, guys like Cortland Finnegan and Luis Delmas. They brought in Noshawn Moreno from the AFC champion Denver Broncos to give them more of a lead back type of presence in the running game. Again, another way to help protect Ryan Tannehill. We'll see what, if anything, Noshawn Moreno gives them early on or at all in 2014. They spent their first round pick on Jawan James, the offensive tackle from Tennessee. While it was a reach and it felt like a big reach, he was an attempt to address the single biggest need of the Dolphins last season, and their single biggest failing as a team and as an organization was that pathetic offensive line that had Tannehill under siege all year long. So looking ahead to 2014, what would be maybe some of the strengths for this team? I look at their wide receivers and tight ends, and I kind of like them. I think Charles Clay is very underrated. Now, I was actually pleasantly surprised when I saw the top 100 NFL players and Charles Clay made the list. He's a guy that I think is explosive. Here's a guy that I think has a lot of skill and a guy that kind of goes under the radar. But you also look at the wide receivers there. Hartline's a solid guy. Mike Wallace, I would expect to have a little bit of a bounce back year. You got Brandon Gibson hopefully coming back strong off of a torn ACL. You've also got a guy like a Jarvis Landry that you drafted in the second round. I actually think the Dolphins are sitting okay at wide receiver and tight end. Sure, you could be better, but you could be a whole lot worse. Look at the Dolphins' running game. Assuming a Moreno is healthy and he's going to contribute, you've got three guys that could form a trio that could actually give you a more consistent, effective running game, I would feel, in 2014 to help protect Ryan Tannehill with Noshawn Moreno and Lamar Miller and Daniel Thomas. And on the defensive end, I still really like their front four with Olivier Vernon and Cameron Wake and Randy Starks. This is a front four that I think is a little underrated, a front four that can consistently get some pressure on opposing quarterbacks and helps the Dolphins win some games on the defensive side of the ball. Now, looking at the question marks for this team heading into this season, I look at their linebacking core, and I still have a lot of questions about it. Deion Jordan's got a 4-game suspension. Even when he comes back, is he a defensive end? Is he a linebacker? Is he a nothing for this team? Guys like Wheeler and Misi, guys that have been brought in that it just didn't really work last season. I don't see where it's going to get a whole lot better in that area for the Dolphins in 2014. I have some concerns about their secondary. Are you really pinning your hopes on guys like Cortland Finnegan and Luis Delmas? I mean, don't get me wrong, Brett Grimes is a stud at corner, but they really don't have much outside of him. And again, Finnegan was bad in St. Louis. That's why St. Louis was more than happy to get rid of him. Delmas can't stay healthy. And even when he is, he's just an okay average safety. I have some concerns about the back seven, frankly, of that Dolphins defense heading in 2014. I think they've got a really good front four, and the rest of the defense, the linebacking core and the secondary. And then I still have some questions about the offensive line. Sure, you bring in Brandon Albert. Sure, you bring in Jawan James. But, did they do enough to fortify the interior of that line? Is Pouncey going to stay healthy all year? Is Brandon Albert going to play up to his contract? Is Jawan James actually going to play up to his first-round draft position? You got to see how this unit meshes and they gel and if they're able to stay healthy. It's still a question mark in terms of how much they're going to improve as a unit. Looking ahead to the schedule for this season, the Dolphins, just like everybody else in the AFC East, they've got the AFC West and they run through the NFC North. And for the Dolphins, they've got Jacksonville and Baltimore in terms of their other AFC conference games. And I think right away from the early portion of the season, there's an interesting 4 game stretch. Weeks 1 through 4, they've got New England at home, then they go to Buffalo, host Kansas City, and go to Oakland. If the Dolphins want to sit there and keep it interesting this year and they want to get off to a nice start and establish that they could maybe be an outside threat to the Patriots in the division or at least a contender in the wild card again in 2014, they need to find a way to at least go 2-2, if not 3-1 in that opening 4 game stretch. Yes, you've got New England, but the Dolphins did beat New England once last year. You've got Buffalo, who I figure will be a little bit improved, but the Dolphins could beat them too. Kansas City, I think, will take a step back in 2014, and the Dolphins have them at home, so they maybe be able to beat them. And then you go to Oakland, and sometimes that could be a bit of a risky thing going out there because it's the Raiders, you let your guard down. But again, it is still the Raiders too. So there's a chance early on in the season for the Dolphins to make some hay and get off to a strong start. And if they do, it could be off to the races for them the rest of the season. And if they don't, it could spell disaster. The keys to success, their offensive line has got to play better. You got to protect Ryan Tannehill. He was under siege consistently all year long. Your offensive line in Miami in 2013 was bad. The running game, as a result, wasn't that good. That offensive line has to be better because it's all about ultimately protecting your young franchise quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. They need one of these 3 running backs to really step up and be that lead running back, that guy that could be a difference maker in the backfield. You've got guys like Moreno and Thomas and Miller, and they all have their characteristics and traits. And maybe Moreno's the most likely to be one if he's healthy, but they need somebody to step up and take the reins and be that lead kind of featured back. And then obviously to me, other than getting a better play out of the back 7 of the defense, I think Ryan Tannehill is a key, obviously. This is year number 3 now. And he's got to find a way to get more out of the people around him. And he needs to establish that he is indeed the future of this franchise and that he will be their franchise quarterback for the next 8 to 10 years. He has to progress and he has to get better. And when I look at the Dolphins in 2014, I don't get a good vibe about them. I know a lot of people, I think, are picking them to be a surprise team and make the playoffs. I just don't get that good of a vibe. I don't think Brandon Albert was the best free agent left tackle that they could have brought in. I don't think Jawan James was the best choice that they could have had at number 19. In terms of other moves, bringing in guys, like I said, like Finnegan and Delmas, you're kind of going to the scrap heap here. There's a reason these other teams were willing to get rid of them. And I just look at the Dolphins and I see some pieces in place, but this is a team that, to me, that really truly lacks that spark. They truly lack that it factor that makes me view them as a playoff team. And for a team, like I said last year, in spite of all their struggles and everything else, they were 8-6 and they had a chance to make the playoffs. Losing those last 2 games now, I think, again, puts Joe Philbin on the hot seat. And with him on the hot seat, there is a definite chance that he could lose this locker room as the season goes along. And I think that could very possibly happen. I ultimately think the Dolphins might end up 6-10, maybe at very best 7-9. In the AFC East and finish 3rd in the division and miss the playoffs again and be in store for a very, very interesting offseason in a few months with a lot of question marks facing the Miami Dolphins.